What if everything you know, your country, your freedoms, even your future, was never meant to exist? In another timeline, Germany crushed its enemies, and the world fell silent beneath a single iron empire. No democracy, no internet, no identity. A 1,000-year rule where technology soars while humanity is chained. This is the world that almost happened. A world just one decision away from our reality. Prepare to see the future you were never supposed to survive.
What if I told you the world you live in was never meant to exist? Think about that for a moment. The streets you walk on, the borders drawn on maps, even the digital screen you're watching this on. All of it could have been erased, replaced by a reality so different, it would feel like waking up in a nightmare. The phone in your hand might not even exist. The language you speak every day could have been outlawed, forced into silence. And the very idea of freedom might be nothing more than a forbidden word, whispered only in secret. Because in 1945, the Allies won the war. They clawed victory out of despair, and with it, the world as we know it was born. Nations rebuilt, technology advanced, and democracy, fragile as it is, became the dream many still chase. But history is never guaranteed. What if the dice had fallen differently? What if the bombs, the battles, and the betrayals had led to a darker ending? What if Adolf Hitler's Germany had not been stopped? Imagine for a moment that his empire had crushed its enemies and rewritten the very rules of human existence. A 1,000-year Reich stretching across continents, reshaping politics, faith, science, and even love itself. A new order where the victors dictated not just who would rule, but who was worthy of life, and who would be erased from it. Would you even recognize the world today? Or would you be standing under banners of tyranny, saluting leaders you never chose, forced to live in a reality where individuality was crushed and obedience was survival? Perhaps technology would be decades ahead, rockets on Mars and supersonic highways across Europe. But at what cost? Innovation without freedom is nothing but a golden cage. This isn't just speculation. Every war, every empire, leaves behind a shadow of what could have been. And in the case of World War II, that shadow is darker, heavier, and far closer than we dare to admit. To answer that, we must first revisit the darkest years in modern history. World War II began in September 1939, when Germany unleashed its fury upon Poland. Within days, the world understood a new kind of warfare had been born. The Blitzkrieg, lightning war, was not just a military tactic, it was a storm of speed and terror. Tanks cut through defenses like blades, dive bombers screamed from the skies, and soldiers advanced with ruthless precision. Poland collapsed in weeks. The world watched in horror, but the nightmare had only begun. Denmark fell almost overnight, Norway soon after. Then Belgium, the Netherlands, and, shockingly, France, the mighty French army, once thought indestructible, crushed in just 6 weeks. By the summer of 1940, Hitler's black banners with the swastika flew proudly over Paris, Rome, Prague, and the Balkans. Half of Europe was under his command. The Nazi Empire seemed unstoppable. But Hitler was never satisfied. His hunger for conquest was endless, his greed boundless. In June 1941, he turned east and launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. Millions of German troops poured into Soviet territory, burning, pillaging, advancing faster than anyone believed possible. Yet here lies the twist. Historians call it his greatest mistake, the move that would bleed his armies dry. But what if it wasn't? Imagine a different winter in 1941. Imagine if Moscow had fallen, the Red Army shattered, and Joseph Stalin executed in a public spectacle. Europe, from the Atlantic to the Urals, would now kneel beneath the Reich. A Nazi empire stretching from Paris to Siberia. No Eastern Front, no Soviet resistance, only the iron grip of Germany. Curiosity loop. But Hitler wasn't fighting only in the East. Across the Atlantic, another superpower was rising. In December 1941, The United States was dragged into the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor. But imagine if the U-boats had cut Britain's lifeline across the Atlantic before America's strength could arrive. Imagine London starved into submission, its cities in ruins, Churchill forced to surrender. And what if D-Day, that legendary invasion of Normandy in 1944, had never happened because there was no Britain left to launch it from? This is the turning point where our alternate timeline begins. Let's imagine the world reshaped by victory. A Germany crushes the Soviet Union, its armies marching unopposed into the heart of Moscow. A Britain, starved by relentless U-boat blockades, bows to defeat. A Japan secures the Pacific, holding China, the Philippines, and beyond. And the United States? It never sets foot in Normandy, because there is no Normandy left to liberate. By 1943, the map of the world looks unrecognizable and terrifying. Nazi Germany dominates Europe, stretching from the Atlantic to the Ural Mountains. Italy reigns over the Mediterranean, while Japan rules Asia and the Pacific with an iron grip. The Allies, once powerful, are shattered fragments of resistance. But here lies the darker twist. Hitler lives, but real power shifts to his inner circle. Himmler commands the SS with terror. Goebbels molds reality with propaganda. The Reich dreams of 1,000 years. But how would this victory change politics, science, and even religion? The Reich redraws the map with ruthless precision. France is reduced to little more than a German puppet, its proud tricolor replaced with the shadow of the swastika. Eastern Europe is carved apart like spoils of war, transformed into colonies where culture and identity are erased. Russia itself is stripped of its name, reborn as Reichskommissariat Moscow, governed not by its people but by German overlords. Millions of Slavs are torn from their homes, enslaved to construct vast German cities. Monuments of steel and stone meant to last 1,000 years. But here lies the paradox. Not everything appears as pure darkness. Germany pours resources into infrastructure. Superhighways slice across the continent, linking cities once separated by weeks of travel. Railroads stretch like veins, carrying goods and soldiers with terrifying efficiency. Visionary architects design megacities, vast urban sprawls reaching from Berlin to Moscow, shimmering with light and power. For the German citizen, life can feel modern, even advanced, efficient transport, strong industry, a sense of progress. Yet beneath this facade lies oppression. For every German living in comfort, thousands live in chains. The promise of modernity is a privilege reserved for the chosen, while the rest of humanity is condemned to servitude. And science? It would advance faster, but at a terrible cost. Without allied competition, German science rises unchecked. Laboratories in Berlin and Munich become the beating heart of global innovation. The first man on the moon is not Neil Armstrong planting the stars and stripes, but a German astronaut, saluting beneath a swastika flag as the world watches in awe and fear. Rockets thunder into the skies, jet planes dominate the air, and nuclear research, once a race between nations, becomes the Reich's crown jewel. In this timeline, technology advances faster, sharper, and with chilling precision. But here's the twist: progress comes at a terrible cost. Medicine, the science of healing, lags behind. Why? Because the Reich purges its undesirable minds, Jewish doctors, minority researchers, and political dissidents, the very people who, in our reality, gave humanity its greatest breakthroughs. Einstein never reaches America. His theories wither in silence. The atomic bomb? Delayed, distorted, its potential never realized in the same way. Cancer research, antibiotics, and vaccines stall, trapped under ideology rather than science. So while the Reich builds machines that reach the stars, its hospitals remain decades behind. Technology becomes a weapon, not a healer. The future looks advanced but frighteningly incomplete. But if science changed, imagine how religion and culture would transform under Nazi control. The Nazi regime despised Christianity's universal morals. The message of equality, forgiveness, and humility stood in direct opposition to their vision of racial supremacy. Churches across Europe are stripped bare. Crucifixes are torn down. replaced with swastikas and banners of the Reich. Hymns once sung in praise of God are twisted into anthems of loyalty to the Führer. What remains of faith is not faith at all, but a carefully engineered mythology. A pagan, Germanic cult designed to glorify power, blood, and conquest. Yet not all religions vanish. In the occupied Middle East, Islam is tolerated, but only when its leaders pledge loyalty to Berlin. In this alternate world, Nazi Germany fans the flames of Arab nationalism, not out of respect, but as a weapon to fracture Britain's empire. Allies of convenience are embraced, but always with the dagger of betrayal hidden behind the handshake. Culture itself becomes propaganda. Hollywood, the dream factory of the real world, never thrives. Instead, German cinema dominates, dark, monumental, nationalistic. Epic films glorify conquest and obedience. Imagine Netflix today. But every movie ends with a salute to the Führer. Entertainment is no longer about storytelling. It is indoctrination dressed as art. And what about love? Family? The most human emotions. In the marble corridors of Berlin, beneath the grand banners of the Reich, shadows whisper louder than speeches. Power struggles erupt daily. Generals plotting against generals, ministers scheming in the dark, each one waiting for the perfect moment to seize control. Loyalty is a mask, betrayal the true currency. Even at the height of its power, the Reich is never truly united. It is a fragile empire held together by fear. And then there are the secrets that history books rarely speak of, the human desires that refuse to be silenced. Behind closed doors, forbidden romances unfold. Imagine the daughter of a Nazi general, raised in privilege, secretly meeting with a captured French intellectual forced into servitude. Their love is dangerous, forbidden, yet real. A spark of humanity in a world built on cruelty. In moments like these, passion becomes rebellion, and intimacy itself becomes an act of defiance. The Reich projects strength, but beneath the surface it is brittle. One bullet, one betrayal, one whisper in the wrong ear, and everything could collapse. Just as Caesar once fell in Rome, so too could Hitler's heirs fall, torn apart not by enemies abroad, but by the ambitions of those within. But let's fast forward. What would today's world look like if all of this had happened? Picture the world map in 2025, a landscape unrecognizable to us. To Europe, there is no European Union, no NATO, no democratic alliances. Instead, there is only Greater Germany, a colossal empire stretching from the Atlantic shores of France to the icy Ural Mountains. The swastika is not a relic in history books. It is the flag that towers over every capital. Paris, Warsaw, Prague, even Moscow, all ruled not by their people but by governors answering to Berlin. Asia, Japan remains supreme. Korea, Taiwan, and vast portions of China remain locked under its iron grip, their cultures bent, reshaped, or erased to fit imperial designs. Africa, the continent is carved into neat colonial blocks, controlled by German and Italian masters. Entire generations grow up never knowing independence, their futures dictated by foreign rulers. America, the United States survives but in isolation. English, once the global tongue, fades in prestige. German is the language of science, politics, and power. Technology thrives, but it is a hollow progress. Rockets already touch Mars, yet the internet, if it exists, is nothing more than a tool of surveillance. Information flows in one direction, from the Reich to the people. Free speech is not suppressed. It is non-existent. The world is wealthier in machines, poorer in humanity. Racial hierarchies dominate daily life, with billions reduced to second-class citizens. Resistance movements spark across continents, but they are hunted, crushed, buried before they can grow. And yet, even in this dark 2025, whispers of rebellion stir. History has shown no empire lasts forever. Just as Rome fell, perhaps one day, so too would the Reich. But here's the final question. What does this mean for us today? History is fragile. One decision in Moscow, one storm on D-Day, one bullet in the bunker, That is all it would have taken to tip the scales. And had fate turned just slightly, the world before your eyes could have been unrecognizable. If Germany had triumphed, humanity might live under a single empire, divided by race, ruled by fear, and stripped of its voice. Freedom would not be a right but a crime. Technology might dazzle, yet the human spirit would be caged. 1,000 years of darkness, masquerading as order. But that is not our reality. Why? Because ordinary soldiers, citizens, and nations stood when surrender was easier. Because countless lives were sacrificed to stop tyranny before it swallowed the earth. The world we live in, flawed, broken, imperfect, is also free. And freedom, fragile as glass, was not given. It was earned. So now I ask you, do you believe humanity is better off under today's imperfect freedom? Or would a unified world under German victory have created more progress, even at the cost of liberty? Tell me in the comments. Because history's biggest, what if, deserves an answer.